Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Legendary Leaders. I am your host, Katrina Jameson. I'm the founder of Legend Leaders, where we arm female business leaders with the strategies they need to master the one rule of career success and live life on their terms, a legend life. All right, we have 5 episodes this month, 5 episodes, because there's 5 Wednesdays here in the month of November, and we are going to tackle a topic I call execing correctly. Execing correctly. And it's a question that we ask ourselves on a regular basis. We ask ourselves this question: am I doing this right? That's ultimately what you're asking when you're wondering if you're execing correctly. Let me dive into this a little bit. Let's go through this a little bit together. So, ultimately, when you started on your career path and you said, hey, I know I started here at this entry-level role, whatever it was, but I'm going to work my way up. I'm going to end up here. I'm setting my sights on a specific position, or it could be not necessarily a specific position per se, but a specific level, right? Maybe you wanted to be a VP or an EVP. And so you didn't know exactly the title that you would have, the seat that you would sit in, but you knew you wanted to achieve that level of success, quite frankly. And so you set your sights on that. Well, as you climb the ladder, so to speak, right, as you move through your career, as you progress, and you navigate through and you find your way closer and closer to that coveted title, whatever it is, then you start to wonder a couple of things. You're getting closer and closer, or maybe you found yourself recently promoted into that seat. And then the question arises, am I doing this right? Now, if you haven't found yourself in that position yet, and you're there, you're almost there, you're one position away, you're sitting in the seat that the next promotion would put you in that executive role. And you're saying to yourself, am I going to do this right? Will I exec correctly? It's a great question. It's a fair question. And it's a question that we all ask ourselves. And why is that? Well, the answer is this. It takes women on average about 10 years to reach the executive ranks. It's about 9.8 to be exact, but it's an average. So for some women, it takes a little less. And for some women, it takes a little bit more. But if we say it takes about 10 years to get there, then think about the things that you've learned over those 10 years. What have you learned? Well, you've learned how to execute. You've learned how to do, right? But what is an executive? What does an executive do in their role? They lead. They're not doers, they're leaders. They do through other people, which means ultimately what has to happen as an executive is you have to do a couple of things. Number one, you have to understand what those direct reports, right, the team that you lead, your direct reports, you have to understand what they're doing. And ideally, you should have done it at some point so that you have a really good perspective and you can go in and teach them how to do it better, more efficiently, or you're going to teach them to do it in a way that you want it done, right? It's usually what they say makes a really good executive. Ultimately, you're a leader, you're a teacher, you're a strategic thinker. You're setting the vision and creating the strategy, not for next week, not for next month, but for years down the road, okay? That's what an executive does, is they lead. But if we've spent 10 years doing and executing and learning how to do those jobs really well, we haven't necessarily learned how to be an executive. And so by the time we reach that seat, or we're almost in that seat, we start to get a little fearful. Happened to me. It happens to a lot of women. If it's happening to you, know that you're not alone. We spend so much time getting really good at doing the work that's in front of us. And there's a reason for that. It's because we're told time and time again, the way you get promoted is that you do your current job exceptionally well. And so we take that to heart. Okay? But here's the deal. There's a difference between getting promoted and being prepared. And I want you to understand that. There's a difference between getting promoted and getting prepared. You focus on learning the job that you're in and doing it exceptionally well to get promoted. But you've got to be prepared once you're promoted into the executive role. As you and I both know, if you think about your career path, if you're already in the executive seat or you're about to be there, you can look back on the path that you took to get there and you can see that it was a whole lot of doing. A little bit of leading, a little bit of strategy, a little bit of that, right? The further you went, a little bit more happened. But overarchingly, you were still doing. And so there's nothing wrong with having not been prepared. We just have to accept the fact that we're not prepared in this moment. We're not prepared yet. And so when we're asking ourselves, am I executing correctly? We're ultimately asking ourselves, have I prepared myself to go and be an executive? And if the answer is no, it's okay, because we're going to spend the next 4 more weeks, right? This one is the 5th, right, altogether. But we're going to spend the entire month of November talking about how to exec correctly. I'm going to arm you with some strategies to help you go in and do this a little bit better. And it's not complex and it's not going to take a heck of a lot of time, but you are going to do some analysis and you're going to look at how you're spending your time. And we're going to arm you with some of the key things that you need to go do so that you can build your confidence. To have career confidence here. You've spent about 10 years getting into the executive role or about to step into that place. So if you're not sure you're doing it right, in a period of time where you really need to know you're doing it right, with the economy the way that it is, then I want you ready. And so let me help you. So what I want you to do is I have a workbook. There's typically a workbook now with every mini-series, right? The mini-series that I do, let me try that again, fit into a month time frame. And so every month has a specific topic, and every topic has a workbook. And so this is no different. There's a workbook for this, and I'm going to highly encourage that you grab that workbook, okay? Because you're going to be able to run through a lot of good pieces and take action on what you're learning. It's critically important that you don't just learn, but that you take action. So go grab the workbook, and next week we're going to really start diving into how to exec correctly. I just wanted you to understand, first and foremost, if you're already asking yourself that question, there's nothing wrong with you. You haven't missed anything, and it happens to the majority of new executives, much less women, okay? So grab the workbook, think through, ask yourself the question, are you executing correctly? And ultimately, the action that you need to take this week is 2. Number 1, download the workbook. Number 2, ask yourself the questions. There's going to be some questions that are in the workbook. They're going to prepare you for next week. So go ahead and do that as well. And I will see you next week, or you'll hear me next week, depending upon how you're listening to this, either on YouTube or listening to it via podcast. And I'll connect with you a week from now. As always, go and be legendary.